Hello everyone, today we'll be looking at the event Anatomy and Physiology for Science Olympiad, and we're going to be starting at the integumentary system, and in the rule book we're going to be looking at just I. So this says functions of the integumentary system such as physical protection, vitamin D synthesis, sensation, excretion, temperature regulation, and the role of the skin in innate immunity. Alright. So the integumentary system is basically just the skin, the hair, the nails, and various glands in the human body. And it is the most visible organ system, and it plays a very, very essential role in protecting body health, basically. So, okay, first we will start with the physical protection quality of the integumentary system. The skin is the skin is the body's frontline defense against certain environmental factors such as physical trauma, microbes, and harmful substances. So epidermal cells contain these two structures, keratin and desmosomes. Keratin is this sort of tough fibrous protein, and desmosomes create a sort of durable bond between cells, which also help make the skin tough and therefore prevent it against external sort of attacks. Desmosomes and keratin basically act as barriers against pathogens, and the outer layer of the skin is dry and slightly acidic. It actually has a pH between 4 and 6. So that's the outside layer of the skin's pH. The outside skin has these antimicrobial peptides. For example, one is dermcidin, and another one is called just defensins. And these are basically secreted by the skin, which create a sort of acid mantle, right? That discourages bacterial and fungal growth and therefore helps protect the skin. All right, moving on, we're going to be discussing the barrier functions of the skin. So there's three main barrier functions. So there's a water barrier, there's UV protection, and there's a chemical barrier. Okay, so starting off with the water barrier, the skin essentially regulates body hydration, which prevents water loss, and this is essential for maintaining homeostasis. And it also prevents excess water from entering the body when submerged in water, such as while swimming. So next we're going to be discussing UV protection, and the skin contains melanin, which essentially absorbs and blocks a portion of UV rays, and this helps protect cells from DNA damage and also prevents the growth and spread of cancers. Okay, finally we're going to discuss the chemical barrier, which is so first, one thing that you need to know about the skin is that it's selectively permeable, which allows for the absorption of some drugs, but also acts as a shield against other harmful chemicals. So what you need to know about the chemical barrier essentially is that basically the skin is semi-permeable and allows some chemicals in that would benefit it, and some are not let in. Next is vitamin D synthesis. So the skin essentially initiates a process called vitamin D production, which is very crucial for overall bone health, bone density, etc. And UVB rays convert a cholesterol derivative in the skin into vitamin D3, and from here the liver and kidneys process it into active vitamin D, which is necessary for calcium absorption in the bones and makes them more dense, more strong, and also supports skeletal strength, essentially. So the important things to note about vitamin D synthesis is that it starts off as sort of a cholesterol and a vitamin D3, and it turns into and finally produces vitamin D. Okay, next is just sensation. This is pretty self-explanatory. So basically the skin or integumentary system is packed with a bunch of these nerve endings which detect sensations, touch, pressure, temperature, pain, and these sort of receptors are very concentrated in the dermis layer. So there's three layers, right? There's the epidermis right here, there's the dermis, and there's the hypodermis. So most of these nerve endings are concentrated right here in the dermis. Okay, and essentially they vary in sort of sensitivity and also depend on sort of like the location in their body, which determines how sensitive they are. Okay, next I'll be talking about excretion, where sweat glands in the skin help excrete small amounts of metabolic waste, including urea, salts, and ammonia, which plays a very essential role in detoxification, just removing harmful chemicals from the body. So there's also the regulation of salt and electrolyte balance, and sweating is a very important part of human and bodily function, especially in terms of the integumentary system. And essentially the integumentary system helps maintain electrolyte and salt balance, and this is just essential for nerve endings and your skin, hairs, etc., to just maintain your body and maintain overall homeostasis. Okay, and next we're going to be talking about temperature regulation, also known as thermoregulation. And what's important about this is that the skin essentially has these things called thermoreceptors, and these thermoreceptors monitor and respond to temperature changes in the body. And so essentially, if your body's too hot and it needs to cool down, there's something called cutaneous vasodilation which occurs, which is essentially when blood vessels in the dermis widen, which increases blood flow to the skin's surface and also releases heat, thus cooling down the body. In contrast, when the body needs to conserve its heat and it doesn't want to cool down, there's something called cutaneous vasoconstriction which occurs, which does the exact opposite of vasodilation, in which blood flow is reduced to the skin and basically warmth is retained in the body. So sweat glands also play a very significant role in cooling. So by secreting sweat, which evaporates, removes heat from the skin's surface. All right, next we're going to talk about the role of the skin in innate immunity. And the integumentary system is essentially a very significant part of just the immune system in general. It not only creates a physical barrier against pathogens, but it also contains Langerhans cells in the epidermis, which essentially detect foreign microbes and keeps your body more safe and away from pathogens. So these cells work in tandem with lymphocytes, which initiate immune responses and prevents the spread of infections. Okay, and finally, which I forgot to include on here, is nonverbal communication. This could be on the Science Olympiad test. It's not in the notes exactly, but it's an important part of the integumentary system. So nonverbal communication. So this is like apart from the physiological roles. So we've discussed like vitamin D synthesis, sensation, excretion, thermoregulation. All these are physiological processes, innate processes which occur in the body and regulate homeostasis. But in the social aspect of the integumentary system, the skin also contributes to nonverbal expression. So obviously face muscles pull on the skin to convey certain emotions, happy, sad, whatever, and skin appearance can signal health status. Okay, so now let's take a closer look into the structure of the skin, or what we call the integumentary system. So this cross-sectional image shows us three main layers of the skin: the epidermis, as I previously delineated here, the dermis, and the hypodermis. Okay, so starting with the epidermis, this is the most outer layer of the skin. You've probably learned this in middle school or at least basic high school by now, and this essentially serves as the body's first line of defense. It's packed with keratin and the desosomes, as previously mentioned as well, and forms a barrier to essentially prevent harmful microorganisms from entering the epidermis right here, the outer layer. Okay. So beneath the epidermis is the dermis, which contains many of the structures which allow just skin functionality, and this is where the majority of skin deadenings and the processes occur for skin function, basically. So we have these sweat glands. So for example, the eccrine sweat gland shown right here, and these glands essentially help regulate body temperature. They essentially release sweat, thus sweat glands, and cools us down as the sweat evaporates. So there's also the apocrine sweat gland as here, which is different from the eccrine sweat gland right here. And this releases sweat in response to stress, not changes in body temperature. Moving on, we have the sebaceous gland over here. And this gland essentially produces a substance, which is sort of like an oily substance called sebum. Not the bodybuilder sebum, but SEBUM. SEBUM, not sebum. Okay? And this basically keeps our skin and hair moisturized, and also provides another layer of protection against certain environmental elements. So, as you can see, there's a lot of blood vessels as well in the dermis. So, for example, right here, all these blue and red vessels. And these are the vessels that we previously discussed that constrict and dilate in terms of thermoregulation. So, essentially, their main function is to help maintain our body's internal temperature. So, the skin is also packed with sensory receptors as well. So, in this image, you can see this thing called the tactile corpuscle. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but here it is right here. And what this does essentially is it detects light touch, and the purpose of it is essentially to detect sensory changes. So there's also the lamellated corpuscle found down here, which senses deep pressure. And so tactile, the touch receptor, is sort of light touches, and the lamellated is the pressure receptor, which is more deep touches. And these receptors essentially allow us to detect temperature changes, pain, and touch, which essentially makes the skin our most extensive sensory organ, and the most important. So finally, moving on, below the dermis, we have the hypodermis, or this is also known as the subcutaneous fat layer. And this layer is not technically part of the skin, but it's essential for insulation and also energy storage. And it essentially helps cushion our muscles and organs against impact. So on top of all these functions that we have discussed, the skin also plays a role in vitamin D synthesis, as of course previously mentioned. When we're exposed to sunlight, for instance, the cells in our epidermis start producing vitamin D, which is good for bone health. So, in summary, we have these three skin layers: the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, where most of our skin function takes place. And what this does is helps us regulate our body, allows us to sense and obviously respond to external stimuli. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.